We are gathered on this beautiful sunshiny day, a perfect day in fact, to celebrate the life of Garland Cannon Jr. I'm Lee Wakefield. It's my privilege to be your life celebrant this morning.
I had a conversation with Dad, I don't know, many years ago, and we were talking about success. And I asked him, so Dad, what is success? And he said, it doesn't really have anything to do with how much you have, what other people think about you. It's more how you feel about yourself inside. And that always stuck with me. That defines who you are.
I think I have almost a PhD. I'm working on my master's in Garland Cannon. I can do the orals, can't always do the writtens. But it has been the most beautiful privilege and joy working with Liz over several months to try to bring to life for you again, some young, some middle, and some in his retirement. A week past 96 years ago today, Garland Cannon was born in Fort Worth, Texas. The only child born to parents Garland Sr. and his wife Myrtle. They were in Fort Worth for 8 fast years before moving to San Angelo. Garland Sr. had tuberculosis and it was better air there. It was the Great Depression back then, if you'll recall, and the family raised chickens and sold eggs, and somehow they got by. Then they moved to the metroplex of Sterling City, where Garland Sr. owned and operated a pool and domino hall. And Mom got to be a stay-at-home mom, involved in her son's world. It would be 1941 when Garland finished high school. What would you have predicted his future to be? Just another fellow? Another good guy who lives in the workaday world? Times were still tough in 1941, so you would have just expected normal things from a group of kids. Except Garland was different. He was a genius. He was also valedictorian of his high school class. His mom hoped he would stay at home, but he wanted to go to the University of Texas at Austin. He was only 17 as a freshman, and after 2 years he enlisted in the USMC. That was the 1943 and the middle of World War II. Although Garland Sr. hoped he would study at UT and then try for OCS, Garland, like all red-blooded young men chomping at the bit to do their part to save their country, didn't want to wait. During that time in the Marines, Garland grew up brilliantly and learned quickly. He was trained in Hawaii, sent off to Tarawa in the 2nd Marine Division, replacement troops for wounded soldiers. He was sent to the 6th Marine Division and trained to invade the Philippines and then Okinawa during the Japanese occupation. One more trip to Singleton, China, and finally he was in Douglas, Arizona. He never made it back home to live in Sterling City, as his mom had hoped, for Garland had seen the world, and the world had seen him. When he went back to UT to finish school on the GI Bill, now being more social than shy, he joined the Phi Kappa Tau fraternity. And as the frat brothers sponsored a Valentine's Day dance, that night Garland lost his heart to Sally Patricia Richardson. They were married by mid-November and welcomed daughter Margaret to the world. After graduation was the Cannon family's first life together in Bryan. He had a teaching spot at Allen Academy, and that was nice for a time, but Garland had been bitten by the traveling bug and infected with joy and energy for packed suitcases that he'd enjoy the rest of his lifetime. Soon the family found itself in Hawaii, not a bad place to be. Near Pearl Harbor, Garland happened to talk with a friend who asked him important questions. What do you want to do with your life? You're a young man, bright young family. What are you going to do? How are you going to spend the rest of your life? The natural answer was education. So off the family went to Stanford for his master's studies. Of course, he took on 3 jobs to pay for the expenses, including gardening and as a teaching assistant. But he fell in love with education even more and decided to go for a doctorate. That meant packing his family up in January 1953, and back they went to Texas, Austin again. You'd think they'd only had visas from Texas and they could only stay so long in certain places before having to return, right? By the time he'd received his PhD in English and linguistics from UT, daughter Elizabeth had arrived. His first teaching job was in Ypsilanti, Michigan. He became quickly well known for being a prolific writer and popular speaker. His understanding of and abilities in linguistics, love for language, and his almost style as Pied Piper or leader of linguistics made others fascinated. He was invited all over the world to speak, which suited him just fine. In 1956, daughter Jennifer was born in Bangkok, Thailand. Of course, as Pat made Garland's travel with the girls as normal a part of life as going to Disney World. Liz remembers going to an ice cream factory in Formosa on a weekend adventure. And just as soon as you thought you had your furniture place, the Cannon family were now residents of Jacksonville, Florida, while Garland taught college and the children introduced themselves into yet another elementary school. New York was, of course, next, as he needed additional graduate studies at Columbia. The children went to a special international school at Columbia, so Garland could walk his daughters to school every day. Normal life, just like everyone, right? In 1951, they met the welcome wagon in Kabul, Afghanistan. During Christmas break, they traveled to India, Pakistan, Tibet, and Nepal for all his linguistics research. The children got up close and personal lessons in geography, culture, art, and of course, linguistics. At this point, Hollywood had yet cast Harrison Ford, but surely the die was cast for a character just like Indiana Jones. And the real-life version was Garland Cannon, although his biggest battles were with dust on ancient volumes of higher learning. Still, in times that were normal, Garland and Pat had a VW microbus and drove anywhere they could. They played bridge just like Ozzie and Harriet, but Liz was learning Farsi while teaching the cook English during those games. Summers meant travel to Europe. Now, some of you may think that was a cakewalk, but you just have to ask Pat Cannon, because when you're traveling with 3 daughters, pretty much what she remembered best were all the bathrooms in Europe. Garland's research produced some of the world's most prestigious volumes on linguistics, the seminal work still prized today. And the family saw the world: Brussels, Jerusalem, Cairo, where they have a photograph of him atop the Great Pyramid. Some of his books are the Japanese contributions to the English language, the Persian contributions to the English language, and the Arabic contributions to the English language. Once the family traveled over and stayed in the dank, dark, eerie, scary castle, Liz thought it was haunted. The castle belonged to a relative of the master of all linguistics, Sir William Jones, who was considered a master of 13 languages and had a working knowledge of 28 others. Of course, Garland wrote the book Sir William Jones, Orientalist, and explained Jones's authority on the relationship of Indo-European languages. Back to the United States the family went, happy to leave the creepy castle, and lived in Skokie, Illinois from 1962 to 1963, where Garland taught at the University of Chicago. For a break from the weather in the summer, the girls went to stay with their grandmother in Sterling City. Well, at least some Cannon family members made it back there. In 1963, son William Cannon, better known as Will, arrived, named of course in honor of Sir William Jones. Middle school for the girls was basically spent back in New York, as Garland went to Queens College to be on faculty. Times were good and the girls were experienced travelers, so Pat didn't mind if they went to the World's Fair there by themselves. The awards that Garland Cannon amassed made him a perfect hire for Texas A&M in 1966, as the college was about to become a university, and they set goals on bringing in true scholars for their students to learn from. His specialties included Arabic, Farsi, and Japanese languages. College Station's historic district was indeed their residence of longest term, as a family, home base, so to speak. In 1970, the wanderlust had returned, though. So Garland went to Ann Arbor, Michigan for a year before coming back here. In 1980, they went to Kuwait, and Will actually graduated from an international high school there. With the children essentially grown, Garland and Pat still loved traveling, so they took part in the Aggie educational trips and served as chaperones going to China and Russia, among other places. To sum up their experiences, Pat calculated that she and Garland had been all over the world at least 3 times. If you look under frequent flyers in the dictionary, I'm pretty sure you'll see their photos there.
He had a little book that I got him back in 2012 called The Book About Me. And it was a few hundred pages long, and it had many, many questions in there about, it was divided into chapters about different periods of your life. And one of the questions was, do you ever get bored? And I kind of zeroed in on that because he said, bored, exclamation, question mark. There's no such thing as boredom. There's always something to do. And that kind of sums up my dad's life. There was always the next thing you do. You never sit back, you don't waste time, and you go on with life, and that was Dad.
In 1989, Garland presented with a health challenge, and prostate cancer had given him a very bad prognosis. Something happened that he described as a miracle. He was on his theoretical deathbed when a young candy striper entered the room and asked if she could pray with him. As a child, he had a nodding acquaintance with faith, but not a genuine devotion to it. He agreed. After that prayer, the next day, Garland woke up, and not only was he alive, he was well enough to go home. It was then that Garland joined St. Thomas Episcopal Church and visited faithfully. He dove right in with the same love and gusto that he did when he was researching. He was there every Sunday, and he'd go visit church members in the hospital. He volunteered at least 2 afternoons or evenings a week during his final years in College Station. In 1995, Garland retired, in name only, as he continued to get up, make his lunch, ride his bike to campus, and go to the carrel and the library that he'd been assigned. He read and did research and then went home. It's the best thing you can do for a genius, is to let him find work to keep him busy. He was very happy in his retirement until 2006, when William, Garland and Patricia's son and Liz, Margaret, and Jennifer's brother, lost his fight with cancer while living in Austin. Four years later, the light of Garland's life, his wife Pat, died in 2010, after 63 years of marriage. He fought sorrow with faith and fought aging by staying active, always busy reading and learning every day. However, in 2017, Liz said to him, "What would you think about moving to San Miguel de Allende?" Took him about 2 seconds to say, "Sí, I'd love it." And that is how the final 3 years of Garland's life would be the icing on the cake. The pace of their lives together, a beautiful casita of his own, a wonderful full-time caregiver, Alec, made a new lifelong best friend, and they traveled to the Sierra Madres and did day trips. Of course, Garland spoke Spanish everywhere they went, and one day out of the blue, he decided he should be called Orlando. He picked that name himself, and that's how he introduced himself as he reinvented life at an elderly age with a brain that was 18 years old in freshness and a bit older in real life. His daughter Liz has honored her father every day of her adult life. There's no other way for me to express this than to say that no father could have ever asked for a more loving, caring, unselfish daughter to devote so much of her life to assuring that he was safe, warm, happy, brilliantly occupied, with love and loving friends all around him, all of the days of his last years. The gift of love cannot be earned, it cannot be purchased, and it cannot be replaced. As we pay tribute to the life of Garland Cannon, may we each be inspired to learn new languages, to travel the country when we can, to places we always said we'd go to, one day, someday, and may we remember to honor the seniors in our lives as they deserve. To Garland, a modest man of genius, we say of his life here on earth, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." Amen.